vraiment pour l'ensemble de ces débats qui étaient passionnants et passionnés. Il est toujours difficile de mettre un terme à des débats dont on pourrait parler des heures, et d'ailleurs, tout à l'heure, nous aurons l'occasion, lors du Walking Lunch, de continuer de discuter tous ces sujets. Nous allons clore donc, cette journée par un invité d'honneur, Nic De Maesschalck. Je remercie infiniment Nic d'être venu ce jour. Nic a plusieurs casquettes. Il est le directeur du BIPAR, mais il est également directeur de la WFYY, c'est-à-dire la Fédération internationale des intermédiaires en assurance, et également le directeur du Forum Europeen pour l'intermédiation d'assurance et financière. Donc, Nic, je vous laisse la parole afin de présenter l'agenda européen. J'espère qu'il n'y aura pas trop de nouvelles à nous annoncer sur des sujets. Je ne sais pas quelle...
Merci beaucoup, mais l'honneur est entièrement à moi. Merci Catherine. Merci Berthe aussi pour l'invitation aujourd'hui. Moi, je suis vraiment devant une tâche très difficile parce qu'en fait, tout a été dit. C'était très intéressant comme débat, je trouve, dans les plusieurs workshops. Et en fait, je me rends compte que tout ce que vous discutez ici aujourd'hui, c'est aussi sur notre agenda. Le BIPAR, c'est à peu près, je dirais, la fédération européenne, donc c'est un peu l'Apcal au niveau européen. Nous avons 50 associations et nous sommes membres de la WFII, et là il y a une centaine, donc on a les États-Unis, on a le Canada, l'Amérique latine, l'Australie, enfin, l'Afrique. Et donc avec la WFII, on va faire du lobbying, c'est pas un sale mot, on va faire du lobbying auprès des institutions internationales, et ça a été mentionné, Gafi a été mentionné aujourd'hui, Nations Unies ont été mentionnées aujourd'hui, on a parlé de l'OCDE, on a parlé de IIS, International Association of Insurance Supervisors, donc j'ai vraiment entendu toute la série des institutions internationales avec lesquelles on travaille. Donc aujourd'hui, par exemple, en ce qui concerne cyber, c'est un sujet à l'OCDE, un sujet qui est très haut sur l'agenda. Le ransomware, bien sûr, je pensais que c'était entièrement et complètement interdit. Donc je suis très surpris d'entendre qu'il y a des remboursements, bien sûr, les mots pèsent. Et puis, I was going to speak in English, but I wanted to make the transition. Sorry, thank you, Catherine. Yeah. Now I have to make the mental shift. So, also at the European level, of course, these subjects that we see today at European level and at national level, we see them absolutely also at international level, because every rule today in a national legislation or even a supervisory principle is the result of a debate. It's an ongoing debate. And that is in fact our role. It's an ongoing debate between the international institutions that I just mentioned, European Commission, European Parliament, EIOPA, European Supervisory Authority for the Insurance and Pensions, ESMA, EBA, and then you have the national supervisory authorities who are there. And we together, and the reputation of our sector, for example, that over the last couple of weeks, a couple of brokers have been attacked or are still under attack in a cyber attack, is a real issue, because today, as BIPAR, together with our national associations, for example, we are talking with the European Parliament, the Council and the Commission to try and have DORA, the digital, DORA is the direct regulation for digital resilience of financial service providers. And what they are doing is that in the initial Commission's proposal, for example, insurance intermediaries, 5, 10 people organizations, 100 people organizations, would have to comply with exactly the same technical standards as, for example, a stock exchange. We counted them. It's about 120 technical checkpoints that you would have to go through. starting with, for example, your Wi-Fi network within your offices should be compliant with certain standards. Now, I believe, honestly, it's the future. We should adapt to it. If not, we will not find an insurer to cover our cyber risk. It was just confirmed in the last panel. But whether that needs to be done within a regulatory framework that is applicable to large entities is a different question. And I'm not certain either that we have to do this for everybody in the same way. We believe also that you can outsource this or use existing systems that make your own system compliant and resilient. So that is the kind of negotiations that we are in today. And over the last week, for example, the European Parliament Econ Committee, this is our terminology, but I want to share it a little bit with you, had a vote on this. And there, what the European Commission's proposal was about 8 months ago is to bring all intermediaries within the picture. We were, let's say, able to explain to the European Parliament that that is perhaps not very reasonable. And so the European Parliament proposes now to reduce that to intermediaries who are, let's say, exclusively relying upon automated sales systems, which would mean, if we know the interpretation of the rapporteur who is behind this, that are, let's say, the completely digitalized systems that are working on the basis of, let's say, direct writing, or where there is no interaction of a human person. So this is a little bit the link. We are working together with Apcal in a very positive and active way, and I thank the board for that, because it's very important that we have national know-how that is exchanged. Some other aspects were mentioned, the European market, the single market. So all this is on our agenda. Altogether, we do have, of course, the IDD obligations, which is the core of our business. And if I may go back to the national side, but you will see that these principles are reflected also within your Luxembourg regulation or rules, although the IDD is just a directive, it's not a regulation. But on the other hand, for example, if you look at the International Association Insurance Supervisory Authority's core principles, that is used by the IMF and the World Bank to make, let's say, the ranking of countries, whether or not they are credit-worthy or not, then you will see that these same principles apply. And so you will find in Australia, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Argentina, and in the US, let's say, the same list of high-level principles in one way or another applying to insurance intermediation. And this helps then, of course, within the framework of the WTO and in the framework of free trade. This helps, of course, to create trust in the market also. But the IDD, as I said, is just one aspect of European set of rules that applies to insurance intermediation. Yeah? Now, very often I receive afterwards during the coffee break the reaction of, "Oh, Europe, what a monster." I'm very sorry, but if this was not done by Europe, then it would be done by the national regulators. Because as was mentioned before, I think it was by Marco, if we don't comply with an international logic, we are out of the market. So in a way, in any event, these rules would apply somewhere, and it is to a certain extent our logic involvement within the modernity and within European values. But on the other hand, I know countries around the world where the rules are much more stricter. So from that perspective, I think that together with our national associations and BIPAR here in Europe, we are able to, let's say, make sure that the transition between a rule and the application of it is something that is proportional, that we have time, and that we can, let's say, adapt over time. Because also, certain rules, if we are not complying with them from the regulatory perspective, it are increasingly our clients who will ask us to comply with their standards. And the insurers may require from us to comply with their standards. Solvency II was mentioned. It was mentioned that Solvency II has an impact upon us. It was said indirectly, but there are direct impacts of Solvency II upon us. For example, the Article 49 with regard to outsourcing. Every underwriting mandate, everywhere where you hold the pen, is in one way or another based upon Solvency II, Article 49. So this kind of picture that you see here is really an interacting picture. One of the things that we will see, MiFID II with the EBIPs, is the big, let's say, discussion that will start as of January. In how far will EBIPs have to, or the distribution intermediation advising on EBIPs, will be further harmonized and brought, let's say, in more harmonization with the MiFID II rules. Some of you in the room may welcome this, others may regret this. We believe that as IDD is more recent, it is perhaps MiFID II that has to adapt to the IDD rules. Because, for example, in a MiFID II world, you don't have to do a demands and needs test. Something you have to do within, let's say, the IDD. So, I can take a little bit of time on all these aspects because I'm going to skip a couple of other aspects because it was mentioned today, and I believe, provoked a couple of explanations that I had for you that were now answered on the basis of my question. So let me give you a quick overview, and I know that Apcal is sharing with you on a regular basis summaries of what is coming and what is going on. So today was a very good illustration of what is on the European agenda. It are in fact the societal challenges that we as citizens are confronted with. We want a greener world, combating fraud and terrorism, cyber. We want to keep Europe competitive vis-à-vis the rest of the world. That is perhaps something that is a little bit missing after Brexit. That is that Europe is perhaps not, or some of the European politicians or decision makers are perhaps not, how would I say, aggressive enough in trying to ensure that the European 27, EU 27 market is remaining a leader in terms of reputation, in terms of know-how, in terms of opportunities in the world, in the financial services, and in particular in the insurance market. We have a very good reputation worldwide. But what we see is that hubs are going to Singapore and other markets sometimes where the regulation absolutely is not softer. It's sometimes stricter. But other elements around this market, other rules are making it perhaps sometimes more flexible to, let's say, operate from there. So another objective is, of course, of Europe is to ensure that SMEs are financed and find funds. 98% of European economy is based upon SMEs. These SMEs in Europe do not find money to invest into, for example, digitalization. So one of the objectives of CMU and retail investment services is to push the public to get rid of their savings and to invest it. So great future to all those in this room who want to, let's say, offer investment products to their clients. And then, of course, Europe wants that it are sustainable investments, of course, because that fits their whole dream and their whole objective. And what they would even more like is that it are sustainable investments in long-term infrastructure products, projects, so that Europe can also, let's say, have their say in it. You see the move from the European Central Bank in trying to have, now also thinking out about for example, trying to create a cryptocurrency. So you see that move of trying to have more control on national central banks' development and politics. So then, of course, we all want our privacy to be protected. And then it was mentioned here, and I would like to bring not entirely in the same context, but the discussions are going on. If we bring the cyber and the pandemics and natural catastrophes in a little bit of, let's say, the systematized kind of risks area, then of course this is a debate that is going on, and where also governments, but also at European level, debates are starting and going on public-private partnerships, using insurance techniques, parametric insurance, for example, that can trigger up to certain limits, certain payments to certain people at certain moments. So, as I said, Europe tries to find solutions, and the instrument for Europe to find solutions are rules. I cannot imagine that if Mrs. von der Leyen tomorrow asks, can you please now offer sustainable finance products, that everybody is going wild and says yes, because Mrs. von der Leyen asks it. So they impose rules upon us, and that is their way to, of course, make their own policy and try to develop or make Europe more competitive in the longer term. So we have a solution in the sustainable finance agenda. Of course, the AML is an enormous issue. It's an enormous issue. Terrorist financing, in particular in the crypto sphere, it's a really new challenge. So they really are going to close all the doors there increasingly. It's an international move, okay? So don't blame Europe for it. DORA, as I said, the digital operational resilience is under development. We have the more digital agenda, and that is something that hasn't been mentioned today, so I agreed with Catherine that I'm going to focus a little bit more on that for the remaining time of, let's say, half an hour that I still have. And then, of course, there is also the longevity risk in the European economy. And there, Europe is, of course, trying to find a solution also. You all know that they created the pan-European pension product, which should become, or at least the basic one, should become a kind of the benchmark, in particular in terms of costs, for all the future pension products, because that is where now really the focus is. Europe believes that the costs of our sector, not only of intermediaries, but also in the, let's say, higher up in the value chain, the costs are too high. So they set here a product with a 1% cost, everything included. We will see what a success it's going to be. Then we have, of course, the GDPR. GDPR goes together with DORA. We are all complaining about GDPR, but sorry, we are all very happy if we have GDPR to protect our own data via our telephone, via our computer, whatever we buy, whatever we sell. So I think we also there have to look into a little bit the reality. I already hear people who would be very, very surprised if they would not have to complete certain questions or give you certain information. In relation to GDPR, if you are sitting with them and you would just enter your data into your computer, these people would be very disappointed. So I believe here again, the client has become used to it, and perhaps we also have to see that a little bit from that perspective. Of course, a really big challenge in this respect is how are we going to deal with this when we are talking about fair artificial intelligence, where you have the big data owners is the wrong word, it's big data havers, because I don't think that social media and the GAFAMs own the data of their clients, or they at least should not own them, but they have these data. And if you combine that, of course, with artificial intelligence issues, then you come to a completely different concept of data protection. And that is something that we are also watching, and where we are also involved in the debate at European and international level. So, big flagships, CMU, Capital Markets Union, with a subpart, more interesting for us, the retail investment strategy. Within that, they try to integrate the digitalization and the sustainable finance. And sustainable, we had the discussion. A lot of issues there, I believe, because the regulation is not ready. What Europe should have done, if they were good product sellers, they should have built the package completely, tested it, and then put it in the market. What they are doing now, they are taking a huge risk that people will not understand it. And that it's going wrong somewhere on that route. So instead of pushing, and it must go quickly, everybody says it must go quickly because time is running. Yes, of course, but then you should have thought about it earlier, no? But I believe it would be nicer to market it as a real European project with labels and so on and so on. But okay, we have to go for it, and I believe it's better to do something than nothing. So let's take a little bit, Bert, a little bit of liability and responsibility, but of course lawyers are helping us to make sure that when we document everything that may be manageable. So, as I said, what is going on the agenda, being on the agenda, I can announce you something. That is that IDD as a whole will not be revised before 2024. Thank you BIPAR, thank you Apcal, we wanted regulatory stability, so the IDD will not be revised before 2024. That doesn't mean that nothing will change, because we already start in August, it was mentioned, you have these sustainability factors that are built into your demands and needs test and so on in the EBIPS part, but in the non-life part, the product manufacturer will have to keep into consideration also sustainability aspects, because under the POG, so on the product oversight and governance part, which is in the overall part, I'm going to be a bit technical just to show that I know what I'm talking about, is in the overall part of the IDD, you have the POG, which is also applicable to non-life, and in there is also a sustainability aspect included. So in a way, but that is in line also with SFDR, because in every sense, the insurer will have to do its publications in relation to SFDR in any event. So why not trying to reflect that to some extent also into your non-life business? I think it makes sense. But okay, this is a different thing. Now, we had all this, so I'm going to something, because I heard today, so sorry, it's not my fault, it was the panel that was too long before, but I'm going to the digital agenda, because I heard today something that perhaps I would like you to think about. I heard today that this room is considered by insurers, and sometimes also by itself, as distributors. I think we are much more. This is what an insurance intermediary is doing since 300 years. I'm not saying every insurance intermediary, but insurance intermediaries, there are insurance intermediaries who are doing a little bit more or a little bit less of all this. What are you doing? Some of you are creating affinity business. Some of you are helping the insurer to get rid of all the administration. Some of you are even having the pen for underwriting, as I said, when you have mandates. Some of you are, let's say, focusing on advice, others are focusing on distribution. But overall, when you look at the business model, this is reflecting everything that an insurance intermediary is doing in between the customer and the insurer. We are facilitating a process. We are not just advising or selling products. We are facilitating a process in two ways. And what is digital bringing? Digital is bringing that we were talking about today's hybrid insurance market. Well, this is now called an ecosystem. Okay? And where before we had our marketing and our relationship with our client, it was the relationship marketing and so on, dinners and so on, it's now called the customer journey. And affinity has become embedded insurance. And when an intermediation has a good overview of the client's needs and risks and policies and so on, we call that now a dashboard. And everything that the consumer is having is a customer experience. And where before mutuals were paying out profit shares, they are now doing paybacks, and mutuals are called peer-to-peer. Yeah? And some of these peer-to-peer become mutuals again because they realized that in fact they were using the wrong word. And where we were outsourcing and having mandates, it's partnerships now. So this Article 49 Solvency II, it's partnerships. Partnerships, I heard the word a lot, especially to go and tell the bad news to your client. That's what I heard from somebody, sorry. It's part of our role. But of course, it's not only a matter of words. There is reality behind. You have the wearables, you have Internet of Things, you have Web3 now. So all these things are, of course, moving on. You have the APIs. We have to, I believe, we have to, and some of you already do, is to sell an API on weather, and it was mentioned today in terms of catastrophes, natural catastrophes, is that insurers are embedding into their products, let's say, a kind of signaling system. Make sure that you are safe because tomorrow we have storm. Yeah? So this is the kind of things where I believe we have to enter in this logic. This is digitalization, but this is the hybrid digitalization. Then we have the robo-advice, we have the fintechs, the cryptos, the blockchains, the NFTs, you know, Web3, as I said, the regtech and subtech. So I can tell you that today supervisors are thinking and discussing with developers a system where artificial intelligence will test your compliance using regtech in order to do their subtech. So the systems will start to communicate with one another and decide who is to be, let's say, supervised more intensely. It's a bit what they are doing already now with tax regulation. They try to compare certain things by computers. So, and then the real big challenge for me is because I don't believe that when you look at all these new things that are coming in the market, there hasn't been yet a paradigm shift of our process. All those who are coming into the market in digital, they are all linking in the existing business model. Nothing has changed. There is a client who has a risk and an insurer who takes the risk. We had the chief underwriter here today. Where the shift is starting to become very, very clear is at the underwriting level. What kind of data do you use? Are we using correlation or are we using causation? And then we come into the parametric insurance side, and that together with the data, I believe that the real challenge for our sector, not only intermediaries but also insurers and supervisors and governments, is not coming from within the sector, it's coming from outside the sector. Data together with artificial intelligence, data ownership. Can I, as an intermediary or an insurer, have the same access to Tesla's data for insuring the Tesla? If the Tesla owner asks the data. That is, I believe, the real challenge, is to give back the right to the client to have access to all its data. I'm not saying to the analysis of the data, that is an art in itself, but the raw data that these firms are collecting should be, in one way, go back to the individual consumer who should have the right to give them to whom he or she wants. And that is the concept of open insurance, but of course that is a two-way thing, because then we also will have to give our data in a much easier way back to our consumer. So this is what I believe is the real big challenge for the next, let's say, couple of years. What I heard today is from the chair of AFA, your Insurers Association, is something that I hear, let's say, all over Europe, all over the world. For the moment, we need the hybrid system. We need the interaction human and digital. But that is, of course, the wording of an insurer in the box. Not certain whether that would be still the speech within, let's say, 10 years' time, because when a certain couple of aspects are seen. In any event, the real digital, they are playing on kind of add-on insurances mainly, as far as I see, and then the car insurance issue, of course. I'm going to stop there because I had still a couple of slides, but in the interest of time, I'm going to stop here. But I thank you very much. I hope that I gave you just a flavor of what we are dealing with within BIPAR, within WFII, together with Apcal. So I thank you very much for your hospitality here today, and I wish you all a good end of meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Nic. And I realize when you say that it was just a flavor of what all the challenges we will have to face, I think that next year you can keep in your agenda a slot for us, because I'm sure we need you to come back. So, merci à tous, merci. Je souhaitais vraiment remercier l'ensemble des intervenants, car ça a été, comme vous pouvez vous en douter, challenging d'organiser cet event au vu des conditions sanitaires. Or, l'ensemble des intervenants ont répondu présent. Donc je tenais vraiment à les remercier, surtout pour la qualité de leur débat. On a eu l'occasion, à l'occasion de cette matinée, on a pu aborder différents sujets, tous aussi challenging les uns que les autres. Et on aura l'occasion maintenant, parce qu'il était important, comme je disais, d'organiser cet event sous format non digital. C'est aussi pour faire du networking. Donc nous allons clore cette journée du courtage par du networking, par un walking lunch, et nous aurons l'occasion de pouvoir discuter de l'ensemble des sujets qui ont été abordés ce jour. Merci encore à tous pour votre venue et votre présence. Merci, au revoir.